General Marcus Kane stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Promise, watching the twin suns of Xerion Prime cast golden light across the crystalline towers below. His weathered hands gripped the railing as he studied the magnificent alien city that had become the center of galactic governance. At 72 years old, Kane had spent the last 4 decades helping maintain the longest period of peace the galaxy had ever known. The Galactic Peace Accord of 2387 had changed everything. After centuries of brutal warfare between hundreds of species, humanity had done something unprecedented. Instead of conquering or destroying their enemies, they had offered something radical: genuine cooperation. The humans brought their unique ability to see patterns, to find solutions where others saw only problems, and to build bridges between the most hostile alien races. Kane remembered those early days when he was just a young captain. The Zephyrian Empire had been locked in a death struggle with the Chronite Collective for 300 years. Entire star systems lay in ruins, billions were dead, and neither side would consider surrender. That was when Admiral Sarah Chen, Kane's mentor, had walked into the War Council chambers on both sides with nothing but a data pad and an impossible proposal. What if winning meant something different? She had asked both species. The Zephyrians were insectoid beings who valued efficiency and logic above all else. The Chronites were silicon-based lifeforms who prized individual achievement and honor. Both species thought the other was fundamentally evil, their very existence an insult to proper civilization. Chen showed them something remarkable: how their greatest strengths could complement each other. Instead of clashing, she proposed joint colonies where Zephyrian organizational skills would manage resources while Chronite innovation would drive technological advancement. She suggested trade routes where each species' unique abilities would create prosperity. Neither could achieve alone. Most importantly, she offered humanity as neutral mediators, beings who could understand both perspectives without belonging fully to either. The negotiations took 17 months. Kane had served as Chen's aide throughout the process, watching as his admiral slowly convinced 2 species to trust each other for the first time in their history. The moment the peace treaty was signed, Kane knew he was witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. Word of the Zephyrian Chronite peace spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Soon, other warring species were approaching human diplomats, desperate to find their own paths to peace. The Aquatic Depths Republic ended their century-long conflict with the gas giant Confederacy. The machine worlds reached accommodation with the organic purist movement. One by one, ancient enemies became trading partners, then allies, then something approaching friends. The Galactic Council was established 50 years ago, with representatives from over 400 species working together on Xerion Prime. Humans, who had never been the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species, became the most trusted. They served as mediators, negotiators, and peacekeepers throughout the known galaxy. Kane's own career had flourished in this environment. Unlike the human generals of the old war years who were known for their tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency, Kane was famous for something else entirely: his ability to prevent wars before they started. He had mediated the crystalline succession crisis, prevented the hive mind fragmentation war, and found peaceful solutions to dozens of potential conflicts. Today's mission was supposed to be routine. The hegemony of Scar, a relatively new species that had only recently achieved spaceflight, had been having border disputes with several established civilizations. Nothing serious, just the kind of growing pains that happened when aggressive young species encountered the complexities of galactic politics. Kane was here to do what he had done hundreds of times before: listen to all sides, find common ground, and craft a solution that everyone could live with. The Scarans were reptilian beings, roughly humanoid but covered in metallic scales that shifted color based on their emotions. They were proud warriors who had conquered their entire home system through superior military tactics and an unwavering belief in their own superiority. Their recent expansion into neutral space had alarmed several neighboring civilizations, but Kane wasn't concerned. He had dealt with proud warrior species before. As Kane prepared for the meeting, he reviewed the files on his personal datapad. The Scarans reminded him of humanity's own early spacefaring days, when Earth's various nations had viewed every new world as territory to be claimed and every alien species as a potential threat. It had taken humans generations to learn that the galaxy was vast enough for everyone. That cooperation yielded far greater rewards than conquest. The conference room on Xerion Prime was a marvel of interspecies architecture. The circular chamber could accommodate beings who breathed different atmospheres, preferred different gravities, and communicated through everything from spoken words to chemical emissions. Kane took his place at the mediation table, flanked by representatives from the 12 species that had expressed concern about Scaran expansion. War leader Thrax entered the chamber with 4 bodyguards, his scales shifting from deep red to bright orange as he surveyed the assembled aliens. Kane could read the emotions in those color changes: suspicion, aggression, and something that might have been fear. The Scaran leader was younger than Kane had expected, probably no more than 40 in human years equivalent. War leader Thrax, Kane said, rising and offering the traditional human greeting gesture of an open palm. "I'm General Marcus Kane. Thank you for agreeing to this mediation." Thrax's scales flickered yellow, a sign of contempt in Scaran culture. "I agreed to nothing, human. My government was told that attendance was required for continued membership in your precious Galactic Council." Kane nodded calmly. This level of hostility wasn't unusual in initial meetings. "I understand your frustration. Change is always difficult, especially when it feels like it's being imposed from outside. But I think you'll find that we're here to listen, not to dictate terms. Listen?" Thrax's voice carried a harsh, grinding quality that Kane's universal translator rendered as bitter laughter. "You want to listen while you strangle my people's expansion? While you force us to bow to species we could conquer in a matter of months?" The other representatives shifted uncomfortably, but Kane remained perfectly still. This was the critical moment in any mediation, when wounded pride and fear of weakness could either be channeled into productive dialogue or allowed to explode into conflict. "War leader," Kane said quietly, "what if I told you that the strongest species in this galaxy aren't the ones with the biggest weapons or the most territory? What if I showed you that the species with the most power are the ones with the most friends?" Thrax's scales shifted to a deep purple, indicating confusion mixed with anger. "Friends? You speak of friendship, while my people are confined to 6 star systems when we could claim 60. The Scaran Empire has the finest military in this sector, yet we are told to cooperate with species that cannot match our strength." Kane gestured to the holographic display that dominated the center of the conference room. With a few touches of his control pad, he brought up a 3-dimensional map of the local galactic sector. "May I show you something, War Leader? This is the territory controlled by the Zephyrian Empire 800 years ago." The display showed a modest cluster of red dots representing perhaps 20 star systems. Thrax leaned forward despite himself, his scales shifting to a more neutral green as his curiosity overcame his anger. "And this," Kane continued, expanding the timeline, "is Zephyrian territory today." The red expanded dramatically, now encompassing nearly 200 star systems, with trade routes stretching across half the galaxy. The Scaran delegation murmured among themselves, clearly impressed despite their hostility. "How?" Thrax demanded. "Did they conquer these worlds?" "Not a single one," Kane replied. "Every system you see joined the Zephyrian Empire voluntarily, because they offered something more valuable than military conquest: prosperity through cooperation." Kane brought up economic data showing trade volumes, technological advancement rates, and population growth across Zephyrian space. When the Zephyrians stopped fighting wars and started building relationships, their civilization expanded faster than any military campaign could have achieved. Their citizens enjoy longer lives, better technology, and more opportunities than any warrior culture has ever provided. The Chronite representative, a massive silicon-based being whose crystalline body caught and reflected the room's light, spoke in harmonious tones that the translator rendered as, "The Scarans assume that strength comes only from domination. They have not learned that true strength comes from unity." Thrax's scales flashed angry red. "Unity? You mean submission? You want the Scaran Empire to abandon our warrior traditions and become weak like the rest of you?" Kane shook his head slowly. "War leader, I've studied your people's history. Your ancestors didn't conquer your home system through mindless aggression. They did it through superior tactics, better organization, and the ability to unite previously warring tribes under a common banner. Those same skills that made you great warriors can make you even greater builders." The human general brought up another display, this one showing potential development projects throughout Scaran space and the neighboring regions. What if instead of conquering 6 systems, you helped develop 60? What if instead of ruling through fear, you led through inspiration? Ambassador Yelena of the Aquatic Depths Republic, her water-filled environmental suit bubbling softly, added her perspective. My people were once raiders of the deep space lanes. We thought wealth could only be taken from others. The humans showed us that wealth could be created, that the galaxy was vast enough for everyone to prosper. Thrax stood abruptly, his scales cycling through several colors before settling on a deep, angry red. Enough of this deception. You speak of prosperity and cooperation, but what you really want is for the Scaran Empire to abandon everything that makes us strong. You want us to become dependent on others, to lose our edge as warriors. Kane rose as well, but his movement was calm and measured.
War Leader, may I ask you a personal question?
The Scaran's eyes narrowed. Speak. Why did you become a warrior? The question seemed to catch Thrax off guard. His scales shifted to confused orange.
To protect my people.
To ensure the strength and survival of the Scaran Empire. And have 800 years of galactic warfare made your people stronger or weaker? Thrax paused, clearly struggling with the implications of the question. Stronger. We have conquered our enemies and claimed territory. But have your people grown in number? Has their technology advanced? Are they living longer, happier lives? The room fell silent as Thrax's scales slowly shifted through a spectrum of colors. Kane could see the internal struggle playing out in the changing hues. Finally, the war leader spoke in a quieter voice. Our population has remained stable. Our technology has focused primarily on military advancement. Our people live as long as they always have. Kane nodded sympathetically. War leader, you've been an excellent warrior in service of your people's strength and survival. I'm asking if you'd be willing to consider becoming an excellent builder for the same reasons. The crystalline consciousness representative, whose communication came as musical chimes, offered. The transition from warrior culture to builder culture need not mean the abandonment of strength. Many of our greatest construction projects require the same courage, discipline, and leadership that characterize the finest military campaigns. Thrax's bodyguards shifted nervously as their leader's scales continued to cycle through various colors. Kane could sense the critical moment approaching, the point where years of conditioning and cultural belief would either be reinforced or begin to change. You ask me to trust species that my people have viewed as potential enemies, Thrax said finally. You ask me to believe that cooperation will make us stronger than conquest. But what guarantee do I have? What proof can you offer that this is not simply a clever trap to weaken the Scaran Empire? Kane smiled, the first time his expression had softened during the entire negotiation. War leader, I can offer you the only proof that really matters. Results. Give us 1 year. Choose one project, one system, one opportunity to try building instead of conquering. If it doesn't work, if your people aren't stronger and more prosperous at the end of that year, then you can return to your warrior ways with my blessing. The room held its breath as Thrax considered the proposal. His scales had settled into a deep blue, indicating deep thought and consideration. Kane waited patiently, knowing that pushing now would undo everything he had accomplished. Finally, Thrax spoke. 1 year, one project. But I choose the terms and I choose the location. Kane nodded. Of course. What did you have in mind? The war leader's scale shifted to determined yellow. The Kepler mining station on the edge of Scaran space. The asteroid field there contains rare minerals that 3 different species have been fighting over for decades. If your cooperation can solve that conflict and bring prosperity to all involved, then perhaps there is merit to your words. Kane extended his hand toward the Scaran leader. War leader Thrax, you have a deal. As Thrax reached out to clasp Kane's hand, the conference room's blast doors suddenly exploded inward. Smoke and debris filled the conference room as armed figures in black combat armor poured through the shattered entrance. Kane's military instincts, dormant for decades but never forgotten, immediately assessed the situation. 12 attackers, energy weapons, moving with professional precision, not a random terrorist attack but a carefully planned military operation. Nobody move. The lead attacker's voice came through a vocal modulator, making it impossible to identify the species. This is a cleansing operation authorized by the True Galactic Order. Kane had heard whispers of the True Galactic Order over the past few months. A shadowy organization that rejected the peace that had defined the last 8 centuries, believing that the galaxy had grown weak through cooperation. They wanted to return to the old ways, where strength was measured purely by military might and the strong ruled the weak. Thrax's bodyguards reached for their weapons, but Kane raised his hand, stopping them. "Stand down," he said quietly. "Let's see what they want." The lead attacker stepped forward, weapon trained on Kane. "General Marcus Kane, architect of galactic weakness, you are charged with the crime of pacification. For 800 years, you humans have poisoned the galaxy with your weakness, convincing proud warrior species to abandon their strength and embrace cowardice." Kane remained perfectly calm, his hands visible and non-threatening. "I'm listening. What do you propose instead?" The galaxy was meant to be ruled by the strong. Natural selection, survival of the fittest, the triumph of superior species over inferior ones. Your cooperation has allowed weak civilizations to survive when they should have been conquered or eliminated. Ambassador Yelena's environmental suit hissed as she tried to speak, but another attacker silenced her with a gesture. The crystalline consciousness representative's musical chimes were cut short by a threatening wave of an energy weapon. Kane studied the attackers carefully. Their equipment was military-grade but from multiple sources. Some weapons were Zephyrian, others Chronite, still others from species he couldn't immediately identify. This wasn't the action of a single civilization, but a coalition of radicals from across the galaxy. "You've made an interesting point," Kane said conversationally. "Natural selection and survival of the fittest. Tell me, which species do you represent?" The question seemed to confuse the lead attacker. "We represent all species that refuse to accept weakness." "But which one specifically? Surely you must believe your own species is among the fittest, the most deserving of survival." Kane could sense tension building among the attackers. He had identified a critical weakness in their ideology. A movement based on the supremacy of the strong inevitably faced the question, strong compared to whom? "That's irrelevant," the leader snapped. "We're here to eliminate the architect of galactic weakness and send a message that the age of cooperation is over." Thrax's scales had been shifting rapidly between colors, but now they settled into a pattern Kane had never seen before. Deep crimson with silver highlights indicating something beyond simple anger or fear. The Scaran leader spoke in a low, dangerous voice. "You call cooperation weakness. You call peace cowardice, but you attack a diplomatic meeting with overwhelming numbers against unarmed negotiators. Tell me, Raiders, where is the honor in that?" The lead attacker turned his weapon toward Thrax. "The Scarans are the worst example of all. Once the fiercest warriors in this sector, now reduced to begging for scraps from species they could easily conquer." Kane saw Thrax's muscles tense and knew the war leader was about to do something that would get everyone killed. He stepped forward, drawing the attacker's attention back to himself. "You're right about one thing," Kane said. "The galaxy has changed dramatically over the past 800 years. Species that once spent all their energy fighting each other have redirected that energy into building, exploring, and advancing. But you've made a fundamental error in your analysis. Enlighten us, General." Kane smiled grimly. "You assume that peaceful means weak. You assume that cooperation means we've forgotten how to fight. 800 years ago, every species in this room was at war with someone. We didn't end those wars because we became weak. We ended them because we became strong enough that we didn't need them anymore." The lead attacker laughed harshly. "Pretty words from someone about to die. The true galactic order will restore strength to the galaxy, starting with your elimination." The energy weapon powered up with a high-pitched whine. Kane didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't try to negotiate. He simply stood straight and looked his killer in the eye. The shot echoed through the conference room like thunder. Kane felt the burning pain lance through his chest, felt his knees buckle as he collapsed to the floor. Through dimming vision, he saw the chaos that erupted in the aftermath. Thrax and his bodyguards erupted into motion, no longer restrained by diplomatic protocol. The other representatives scattered or took cover as energy beams filled the air. But Kane's final coherent thought wasn't about the battle raging around him. It was about a conversation he'd had with Admiral Chen 40 years ago, as the old woman lay dying in a hospital bed on Earth. "Marcus," she had whispered, "peace isn't the absence of the ability to fight. Peace is having that ability and choosing not to use it. But if someone forces your hand..." Kane's eyes closed as the Admiral's final words echoed in his memory. "If someone forces your hand, make sure the galaxy remembers why we chose peace in the first place." The attackers had made a critical miscalculation. They thought 800 years of peace had made the galaxy weak. What they failed to understand was that 800 years of peace had been maintained by species who chose cooperation over conflict, not because they couldn't fight, but because they didn't want to. Now that choice had been taken away from them. As Kane's life faded, emergency systems throughout the Zerion Prime complex began broadcasting a priority alert to every member of the Galactic Council. The message was simple and devastating. General Marcus Kane, chief mediator of the Galactic Peace Accord, has been murdered during a diplomatic negotiation by members of the True Galactic Order. The 800-year peace is officially ended. All species are hereby authorized to respond with appropriate measures. The age of cooperation was over. The age of consequences was about to begin. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and military command centers, on colony worlds and trading stations, the news spread like wildfire. General Marcus Kane, the man who had prevented more wars than any other being in galactic history, had been gunned down while trying to negotiate yet another peaceful solution. The reaction was swift and unanimous. Species that had been allies for centuries began mobilizing their fleets. Civilizations that had converted their war machines to peaceful purposes began converting them back. The vast economic and technological networks that had been built through 8 centuries of cooperation were now being turned toward a single purpose: finding the true galactic order and making them understand exactly why the galaxy had chosen peace in the first place. The hunt was about to begin. Admiral Sarah Chen Jr., granddaughter of the legendary diplomat and named in her honor, stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Force flagship Retribution. Unlike the peaceful vessels that had carried human diplomats for 8 centuries, this ship had been pulled from the mothball fleet and retrofitted with technologies that hadn't been seen in active service since the ancient wars. The holographic display before her showed the current disposition of forces across the galaxy. It was a sight that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Every major civilization had declared war on the true galactic order, and fleets that had been used for peaceful exploration and trade were now being converted into instruments of vengeance. "Admiral," reported Captain Liu from the tactical station, "we've received confirmation from the Zephyrian Empire. They're contributing 400 vessels to the Joint Task Force. The Chronite Collective has pledged 200, plus their entire industrial output for war materials." Chen nodded grimly. "And the others?" "Every member of the Galactic Council has pledged support. Even species that have never maintained military forces are offering to provide logistics, intelligence, and industrial capacity. Admiral, I've never seen anything like this level of cooperation." The irony wasn't lost on Chen. The true galactic order had murdered Marcus Kane to end cooperation and restore conflict to the galaxy. Instead, they had created the largest cooperative military effort in galactic history. 800 years of peace hadn't made the galaxy weak. It had made them strong enough to work together when truly threatened. "What's our intelligence on the order's current position?" Chen asked. Lieutenant Commander Torres, the intelligence officer, brought up a new display. "They've established a base of operations in the Void Reaches, the dark matter region between the galactic arms. Long-range sensors indicate at least 50 capital ships plus supporting vessels. But Admiral, there's something else." Chen turned her attention to the younger officer. "Report." "The order isn't just a random collection of extremists. Our analysis suggests they have significant backing from unknown sources. Their equipment is too advanced, their organization too sophisticated. Someone has been planning this for a very long time." Before Chen could respond, the communication system chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The face that appeared on the main screen was one she recognized: War Leader Thrax. His scales now permanently settled into the deep red of righteous anger. "Admiral Chen," Thrax said without preamble, "the Scaran Empire requests the honor of leading the first assault on the Order's positions." Chen studied the alien leader carefully. The murder of General Kane had affected Thrax profoundly. The Scaran who had come to the peace negotiations as a reluctant participant had become one of the most vocal advocates for hunting down Kane's killers. "War Leader, I appreciate your commitment, but this needs to be a coordinated effort. We can't afford to let anger override strategy." Thrax's scales shifted slightly, indicating acknowledgement of her point. "You are correct, of course. But Admiral, you did not see what I saw in that conference room." General Kane died trying to show me that strength and honor could be expressed through building rather than destroying. The Order murdered him for teaching that lesson. They must face the consequences. The sentiment was echoed by every species in the Alliance. The true Galactic Order had assumed that peaceful civilizations would respond to violence with negotiation and compromise. They had gravely miscalculated the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. Chen brought up the tactical display, showing the planned assault on the Order's base. We go in as one fleet with one purpose. Every species contributes according to their strengths. The Zephyrians will handle logistics and coordination. The Chronites will provide technological support and heavy assault capabilities. The Aquatic Depths Republic will handle reconnaissance in the dark matter regions. And the Scarans? Thrax asked. Chen smiled coldly. The Scarans will do what they do best. When we find the Order's leadership, you'll have the honor of bringing them to justice. Over the next several weeks, the largest fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of the void reaches. Ships from hundreds of different species, using technologies that had been developed for peaceful purposes, but were now being adapted for war. The sight would have terrified the ancient warriors of 8 centuries ago, not because the individual ships were particularly fearsome, but because they represented something unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time, every major civilization was united in common purpose. The economic networks built through centuries of trade had been converted into military supply lines. The communication systems developed for diplomatic coordination now served to link fleet operations across impossible distances. The cultural exchange programs that had created understanding between species now enabled seamless cooperation between forces that had once been enemies. Chen stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at the assembled fleet. Beside her, War Leader Thrax had come aboard to coordinate the final planning stages. General Kane would have been amazed, Thrax said quietly, his scales showing the deep blue of contemplation. He tried to show me that cooperation made us stronger. He could never have imagined how strong. Chen nodded. My grandmother used to say that peace wasn't the absence of war, it was the presence of justice. The Order ended the peace when they murdered Marcus Kane. But they're about to discover that we haven't forgotten how to deliver justice. The communication system crackled to life with a transmission from the lead reconnaissance vessel. Commander Yael of the Aquatic Depths Republic reported, Admiral, we've located the Order's main base. It's heavily fortified and defended by approximately 200 vessels, but we've also detected something else. Report. There are slave ships in the base perimeter, thousands of them. It appears the Order has been conducting raids on peaceful colonies, taking prisoners for forced labor. Admiral, there are beings from dozens of species being held against their will. The news sent a wave of anger through the fleet that was almost palpable. The true Galactic Order hadn't just murdered a diplomat. They had returned to the ancient practice of slavery, something that had been eliminated from galactic civilization for over 6 centuries. Chen's voice was ice cold when she spoke. All commanders, this is Admiral Chen. We have confirmation that the Order is holding slaves. This is no longer just about justice for General Kane. This is about protecting every innocent being in the galaxy from a return to the Dark Ages. War Leader Thrax's scales flashed bright silver, the Scaran equivalent of bearing fangs. Admiral, my people know the shame of slavery. We were enslaved by another species before we learned to fight. No being should suffer that fate. The Scaran fleet requests permission to begin the attack. Chen looked out at the assembled armada, ships from civilizations that had once been mortal enemies now standing together against a common threat. Permission granted, War Leader. All vessels, commence the assault. Let's remind the galaxy why we chose peace in the first place. The fleet moved forward into the dark matter region, their combined sensor arrays cutting through the cosmic interference to locate their targets. The true Galactic Order had chosen their base well. The dark matter provided excellent concealment and made long-range communications nearly impossible. But they had underestimated their enemies. The combined technological capabilities of hundreds of species had found solutions to problems that would have stymied any single civilization. Zephyrian efficiency meshed with Cronite innovation, while Aquatic Depths navigation expertise guided them through the treacherous region. As the Order's base came into view, Chen realized the scope of their enemy's ambition. This wasn't just a military facility. It was the foundation for a new empire built on the old principles of conquest and domination. Slave quarters, weapons factories, and training facilities for an army designed to conquer the galaxy. All vessels, Chen broadcast to the fleet. Remember that our goal is justice, not vengeance. We fight to protect the innocent and restore peace. But if the Order wants to remind the galaxy how destructive war can be, we'll give them a demonstration they'll never forget. The battle was about to begin. The battle for the true Galactic Order's stronghold began with a precision that would have impressed the ancient military strategists of any species. 800 years of peace hadn't eliminated military knowledge. It had refined it, tempered it with patience and strategic thinking that no warlike civilization had ever possessed. Admiral Chen watched from the command center as the combined fleet executed a battle plan that utilized the unique strengths of every participating species. The Zephyrians led with perfect coordination, their ships moving in formations so precise they seemed like a single organism. The Chronites followed with devastating firepower, their weapon systems having evolved from mining equipment that could crack planets into military hardware that could shatter space stations. Order vessels are responding, reported Captain Liu. They're launching fighters and moving their capital ships into defensive positions. Admiral, their technology appears more advanced than our intelligence suggested. Chen nodded grimly. She had expected this. Whoever was backing the true Galactic Order had provided them with weapon systems that surpassed anything in the standard galactic arsenal. But advanced technology meant nothing without the wisdom to use it properly. Execute Plan Delta, Chen ordered. Let's show them what 8 centuries of cooperation can accomplish. The fleet's response was immediate and devastating. Instead of meeting the Order's attack head-on, the combined forces scattered into smaller groups that attacked from multiple vectors simultaneously. The Aquatic Depths Republic's vessels, designed for deep space navigation, slipped through the dark matter like shadows, striking at the Order's supply lines. The gas giant Confederacy's ships, massive and heavily shielded, absorbed the enemy's heaviest fire while the more nimble vessels of other species darted in and out, picking off targets with surgical precision. War leader Thrax commanded the Scaran contingent from his flagship Honor's Blade, and Chen could hear the fierce joy in his voice as he coordinated the attack. Scaran vessels, remember our new purpose. We fight not for conquest, but for justice. Show these pretenders what true warriors fight for. The Scaran ships moved like hunting predators, using tactics that had been honed through generations of warfare, but were now employed in service of a higher cause. They targeted the slave ships, first using precision strikes to disable engines and weapons without harming the prisoners inside. But the true Galactic Order wasn't going to surrender easily. Their base began launching waves of fighters equipped with technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Energy weapons that could phase through shields, missiles that could navigate through dark matter as if it were empty space. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, the Order's technology is definitely not standard galactic. Some of these weapon signatures match theoretical designs from the archives, but nothing that should be possible to build. Chen frowned as she studied the sensor readings. Torres, cross-reference those signatures with historical databases. Look for anything from the pre-peace era, especially projects that were abandoned as too dangerous. While Torres worked, the battle continued to rage around them. The combined fleet was holding its own, but the Order's technological advantages were beginning to tell. Several Allied ships had been destroyed and more were taking heavy damage. Then War Leader Thrax's voice crackled over the communication system. Admiral Chen, my boarding parties have reached the first slave ship. You need to see this. Holographic display changed to show the interior of the captured vessel. Chen's blood ran cold as she saw what Thrax had discovered. The prisoners weren't just random civilians captured during raids. They were scientists, engineers, and researchers from across the galaxy. Beings who had been working on the most advanced, peaceful technologies. They're not just taking slaves, Chen realized. They're stealing knowledge. These people have been forced to develop weapons and military technology for the Order. The implications were staggering. The true Galactic Order hadn't just rejected the peaceful cooperation that had defined the last 8 centuries. They had perverted it, using the galaxy's greatest minds to create instruments of conquest and oppression. "Admiral," Torres called out, "I found something in the historical databases. During the final years before the Great Peace, there was a black project called the Dominion Protocol. It was supposed to create technology that could allow a single species to dominate all others. The project was shut down and all records were supposedly destroyed." Chen felt the pieces clicking together. But someone kept copies. Someone has been developing Dominion Protocol technology in secret for 800 years. The communication system chimed with an incoming transmission, but this one wasn't from the fleet. It was coming from the Order's base, and the voice that emerged was coldly familiar. "Admiral Chen, I am Overlord Vexus, Supreme Commander of the True Galactic Order. I offer you one chance to withdraw your forces and return to your pathetic, peaceful existence." Chen recognized the name from intelligence reports. Vexus was believed to be the leader of the Order, though no one knew what species he belonged to. His voice came through universal translators, but there was something about it that seemed artificially processed. "Overlord Vexus," Chen replied, "you murdered General Marcus Kane during a diplomatic negotiation. You've enslaved innocent beings and forced them to create weapons for your conquest. We're here to ensure that you face justice for your crimes." Vexus laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Justice? You speak of justice while your precious peace has made the galaxy weak and complacent. We represent the return of natural order, where the strong rule and the weak serve. Your cooperation is an aberration that will be corrected." "You're wrong about one thing, Vexus," Chen said calmly. "Our peace didn't make us weak. It made us smart enough to work together. And that's something you're about to learn the hard way." Chen signaled to her tactical officer, who activated a program that had been prepared for this moment. Across the battle space, every Allied ship simultaneously began broadcasting on the same frequency, their combined signal strength cutting through the dark matter interference that had protected the Order's base. The message they broadcast wasn't a threat or a demand for surrender. It was something far more devastating. A complete analysis of the Order's technology, including detailed explanations of how the stolen Dominion Protocol weapons worked and how to counter them. The information was transmitted to every ship in the fleet simultaneously, allowing the Allied forces to adapt their tactics in real time. Suddenly, the Order's technological advantages began to evaporate as the combined knowledge of hundreds of species found solutions to their most advanced weapons. "That's impossible," Vexus snarled over the communication link. "Those countermeasures should take years to develop." Chen smiled grimly. "You made the same mistake that every tyrant throughout galactic history has made, Vexus. You assumed that your enemies would be as isolated and suspicious as you are. But we've had 800 years to learn how to share knowledge, how to combine our different strengths into something greater than the sum of our parts." The tide of battle was turning rapidly. The Order's fighters found their advanced weapons suddenly ineffective as the Allied ships adapted their defenses. The base's defensive systems were being systematically dismantled by coordinated strikes that no single species could have executed alone. But Vexus wasn't finished. "If I cannot rule the galaxy," his voice came through the static, "then I will ensure that no one else can either. You want to see the ultimate expression of the Dominion Protocol? I'll show you what true power looks like." Chen watched in horror as energy readings from the Order's base spiked to levels that should have been impossible. Whatever Vexus was preparing to unleash, it was powerful enough to threaten not just the fleet, but potentially entire star systems. "All ships, emergency withdrawal," Chen ordered. "Get clear of the base immediately." But War Leader Thrax's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, we still have rescue teams aboard the slave ships. If we withdraw now, thousands of innocents will die." Chen faced the same kind of impossible choice that had confronted military commanders throughout history. Save her own forces or risk everything to protect the innocent. It was exactly the kind of decision that had led to 8 centuries of warfare before the Great Peace. But this time she wasn't facing it alone. "Admiral?" came the voice of Captain Zeril from the Chronite vessel Crystal Determination. "Our analysis indicates that Vexus is attempting to overload the base's reactor using Dominion Protocol amplifiers. The explosion will create a dark matter cascade that could destroy everything within 50 light-years. Chen stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. 8 centuries of peaceful cooperation had taught the galaxy many things, but the most important lesson was that no species had to face impossible choices alone. All rescue vessels, she broadcast to the fleet, continue evacuation operations. All other ships prepare for simultaneous defensive action. We're not abandoning anyone. What happened next would be remembered throughout galactic history as the moment when cooperation transcended the merely practical and became something approaching miraculous. Every species in the fleet contributed their unique capabilities to a solution that none of them could have achieved alone. The Zephyrian vessels formed a perfect geometric grid around the Order's base, their collective shield generators creating a containment field. The Chronite ships positioned themselves at key points, their industrial-grade energy manipulators ready to channel the explosion's force. The gas giant Confederacy's massive vessels moved into position to absorb as much destructive energy as possible, while the Aquatic Depths Republic's ships prepared to navigate the dark matter streams that would be created. Thrax, Chen called to the Scaran commander. Your people are the finest tacticians in the galaxy. I need you to coordinate the rescue operations while we contain this explosion. War Leader Thrax's scales flashed with determined silver. Admiral, it will be done. Scaran honor demands that not one innocent life be lost to these cowards. As the energy readings from the base continued to climb toward critical levels, the evacuation became a race against time. Scaran boarding parties worked with desperate efficiency, loading rescued slaves onto transport vessels, while the base's reactor moved toward a catastrophic overload. Admiral, reported one of the rescue commanders, we've found something else. There's a hidden section of the base where they're holding someone in a specialized containment cell. The energy signature suggests it's a human. Chen felt her heart skip a beat. Get to that cell immediately, if there's even a chance. But before the rescue team could respond, Overlord Vexus's voice erupted over the communication system one final time. You think your precious cooperation can save you? Watch as the power of true dominion destroys everything you've built. The base's reactor went critical. The explosion that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The Dominion protocol amplifiers turned what should have been a simple reactor overload into a cosmic catastrophe that threatened to tear holes in space-time itself. Dark matter streams lashed out in all directions, carrying enough destructive force to sterilize entire solar systems. But the combined fleet was ready. The Zephyrian containment grid held, channeling the explosion's energy into directed streams that the Chronite ships could manipulate. The gas giant Confederacy vessels absorbed massive amounts of destructive force, their reinforced hulls and powerful shields designed to withstand the crushing pressures of their native environments. The Aquatic Depths Republic navigators guided the dark matter flows away from populated systems, their deep space expertise allowing them to predict and redirect the chaotic energy patterns. In the midst of the cosmic firestorm, the rescue operations continued. Scaran teams fought their way through collapsing corridors and failing life support systems, evacuating the enslaved scientists and engineers who had been forced to create the Order's weapons. And in the deepest, most secure section of the base, they found the prize that Vexus had been hiding. General Marcus Kane was alive, barely conscious and bearing the scars of months of torture and interrogation, but alive. The Order hadn't killed him in that conference room. They had used advanced medical technology to fake his death, then spirited him away to their base where they had spent months trying to break his will and force him to reveal the secrets of galactic cooperation. They had failed utterly. Marcus Kane, architect of 8 centuries of peace, had endured everything they could inflict upon him without breaking. His rescue became the symbolic victory that defined the entire campaign. As the explosion finally died away and the dark matter stream settled into stable patterns, Admiral Chen stood in the medical bay of the Retribution, looking down at the man whose apparent death had triggered the largest military action in galactic history. "General," she said softly as Kane's eyes fluttered open, "it's good to have you back." Kane smiled weakly.
Sarah, little Sarah Chen?
His voice was hoarse from months of interrogation, but his eyes were clear. "You've grown up to be quite the admiral." "I had a good example to follow," Chen replied. "Both from my grandmother and from you." Kane struggled to sit up, his gaze moving to the tactical display that showed the aftermath of the battle. The true Galactic Order's base had been completely destroyed, but their fleets had been captured rather than eliminated. Thousands of rescued slaves were being treated and prepared for return to their homeworlds. Most importantly, the galaxy remained intact. Did we win? Kane asked. Chen smiled. We did more than win, General. We proved that 800 years of peace didn't make us weak. It made us strong enough to fight as one people when we had to. War Leader Thrax entered the medical bay, his scales showing the deep blue of profound respect. General Kane, the Scaran Empire owes you a debt that can never be repaid. You showed me that true strength comes from protecting others, not conquering them. That lesson saved not just our alliance, but our souls. Kane reached out and clasped the Scaran's clawed hand. Thrax, my friend, you were already a great warrior. I just helped you discover that the greatest battles are fought not for conquest, but for justice. Over the following months, as the galaxy returned to peace, the full scope of the True Galactic Order's plot became clear. They had been a coalition of extremists from dozens of species, funded by shadowy figures who had hoarded Dominion protocol, technology since before the Great Peace. Their plan had been to shatter galactic cooperation by eliminating its most visible symbol, the human diplomatic core. Instead, they had accomplished the opposite. The murder of General Kane had united the galaxy more completely than any diplomatic achievement in history. Species that had maintained polite but distant relationships for centuries now worked together with a closeness that amazed everyone involved. The rescued scientists, grateful for their liberation, shared their knowledge freely across all species, leading to technological advances that surpassed anything achieved during the war years. The Scaran Empire became one of the most influential voices for peace in the Galactic Council, with War Leader Thrax eventually becoming the first non-human to serve as Council President. And Marcus Kane, recovered from his ordeal and bearing new scars but unbroken in spirit, returned to his work as the galaxy's premier diplomat. But now he worked with the knowledge that peace was not the absence of strength, but the presence of justice, and that sometimes the greatest act of cooperation was to stand together against those who would destroy what had been built. The True Galactic Order had ended 800 years of peace, just as they had planned, but they had replaced it with something even stronger, 800 years of unity, forged in the crucible of shared struggle and tempered by the understanding that some things were worth fighting for. The galaxy had learned that cooperation was not a sign of weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength, and it had learned that lesson in a way that would never be forgotten. The age of peace had ended, but the age of true unity had begun.